And you have to go and confiscate the property of your fellow Jews. And you are pretending to not be a Jew, and if anybody finds out, you're dead. He actually had to endure watching people sent off to their eventual murders. Watching people gathering their stuff, sending them off, knowing that they were going to go to their death. What does that do to somebody? How do you deal with it? How many years of therapy would somebody need after something like that? This is where George, I think this is important. I think this is where George Soros first learned to pretend to be something other than who he was. He had to. I am not blaming or questioning a 14-year-old or his parents for trying to keep him alive, trying to keep the family alive. I don't think anyone can understand what it must have been like to be Jewish in that scenario. Can you? Especially 14. I don't want to question the 14-year-old. I would, however, like to question the 80-year-old man who has never once said he regretted it, but more than that, he views it as the happiest year of his life. Again, not my words, his words. Listen.
It was actually probably the happiest year of my life, that year of German occupation. For me, it was a very positive experience. It's a strange thing, you know, because you see incredible suffering around you, and in fact, you are in considerable danger yourself. But you're 14 years old and you don't believe that it can actually touch you. You have a belief in yourself, your belief in your father. It's a very happy-making, exhilarating experience.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody describe the Holocaust years like that. Maybe he's the most healthy man you've ever met. Maybe somehow or another he just got through it. But he also has spoken about how his experience in Hungary has affected his psyche. Listen to this.
Did anybody tell you in Hungary why they didn't like Jews at the time?
Oh yes, and that of course is something, again, very, very much a part of my psyche, anti-Semitism and you know, hatred of Jews, which was quite widespread within Hungary.
Even to his own home. I mean, I would love to spend an hour. He's not going to come on in this program and spend an hour with me, and we'd have bigger fish to fry on this. But I would love to understand how it affected his psyche, having his mother basically agree, apparently, I don't mean to judge, with the Germans on hatred of Jews, being anti-Semitic in his own home. How has he navigated that? I'm not going to spend the time. I have invited George Soros to come on this program. He has declined. We have bigger fish to fry. Like, how does he view the world? It sure would be interesting to explore how this affected his feelings on Israel, which he does not support. He donates so much money to organizations that speak out against Israel. Some stick out more than others on the donations, but is there any connection there? I'm going to concentrate on the fact that I think the lesson he learned in that horrific year of 1944 was that if you hide your true identity, you can gain power, you can survive. And those who are seen as disadvantaged or handicapped and don't hide their identity, well, they don't survive. The next formative step in Soros' life was college. Now, this is where he attended the London School of Economics. Now, this is the same school that Hayek was from. He wrote Road to Serfdom. This is freedom fighter. But it's also the school where the Fabian Socialists hung out. A Fabian Socialist University, you remember. The Fabian window we told you about. This is the famous English Fabian Society. We took this picture, actually. Tony Blair was standing right here with it. Fabian Socialists, what are they doing? They're heating the world up in the fire that they themselves are stoking. Why are they heating it up? Because they're about to hammer it and remold it nearer to the heart's desire. Fabian Socialists are the American progressives. It's the same thing. Heat the world up, cause the problems, So the world heats up so you can remold it. So which part of the London School of Economics does Soros favor? The Hayek side or the Fabian side? Which one? This is where he learned about an open society. The Open Society Institute, which is now his charitable arm. Sounds harmless on the outside, but, really, who doesn't want to be open? But when you listen to him at the top of the hour in the beginning of the program, we played that. Notice that logo behind him? That was his Open Society Institute. Can your institute bring in more foreign influence here in America? What is an open society, really? Well, you saw it a moment ago. The world has a vote in Congress, but you also saw it in his father, Soros, a world free of nationalities. It is a global replacement for our republic. For all the work our founders did, that's old news. We must progress past it. We must have a new world order. It is a replacement for the republic. He has donated more than $14 million to a group here in America called the American Constitution Society. Well, that sounds great. Except this is a progressive legal group with an area of focus on constitutional interpretation and change. The Constitution can be changed, but you do it not in the shadows. You do it not being invisible. You don't hide who you are. You change it through the amendment process. But he knows you wouldn't go for it. So, he leaves school, leaves Hungary, he survives. He goes to school. He finds open society. And then he becomes wealthy. Now, how did he become wealthy enough to fund his quest to denationalize the world? Hedge funds. He has the estimated 5th largest hedge fund in the world. It's called the Quantum Fund, which, George, sometime we should kibitz about the name. It's worth about $27 billion. Now, here's the interesting and funny thing about hedge funds. We hear all the time about the greedy Wall Street brokers. We hear about greedy speculators, greedy bankers. We hear about greedy executives and their obscene bonuses and their expensive carpets and everything else. But why don't we hear more about those greedy hedge fund managers? Is it a coincidence that everything under the sun when it comes to capitalism is targeted for regulation by Congress, except for hedge funds? You should decide on that one. Now, he's got the wealth. But what did he do with the wealth? He decided to collapse regimes and currencies. He did it in England, in Russia, Malaysia, Georgia. Soros lit the fuse to get it done. He's known as, we told you last night, the man who broke the Bank of England. The Prime Minister of Malaysia called Soros unscrupulous profiteer. In Thailand, he was branded an economic war criminal who sucks the blood from people. In 1994, he stated, I just write that the former Soviet empire is now called the Soros Empire. He started getting so much recognition. It fed into his ego. His ego started to grow. He started to get a God complex. Again, not my words, his words. Soros confessed in the New Yorker in 1995 that he had a messianic illusion, a sense of himself being superhuman, quote, since childhood, end quote. He saw in himself the many attributes of the God of the Old Testament, quote, God in the Old Testament has a number of attributes, you know, like invisible. I was pretty invisible. Benevolent. I was pretty benevolent. All-seeing. I tried to be all-seeing. Benevolent, all-seeing. But the one that sticks out here is invisible. You can see his ego on display when he talks about going after regimes. Listen to it's a game.
When you try to improve society, you affect different people and different interests differently, and they are not actually commensurate. So you very often have all kinds of unintended adverse consequences. So I had to experiment, and it was a learning process. The first part was this subversive activity, disrupting repressive regimes. That was a lot of fun, and that's actually what got me hooked on this whole enterprise.
Remember, he believes, and so do many in his regime, that Fox News is a repressive regime. America is a repressive regime. He is turning lives and countries upside down and inside out.